The standard American tank, the M4 Sherman, was reliable and produced in vast numbers, but it was dangerously outgunned. A Sherman crew engaging a Panther was often a David versus Goliath scenario, but usually Goliath won. American tankers pleaded for a vehicle that could go toe-to-toe with the big cats. Their pleas were finally answered, but only in the 11th hour. While it performed well against fortifications and smaller targets, it had yet to face its true test, a one-on-one duel with a Panther or a Tiger. The German tank crews, meanwhile, were starting to see this new vehicle. They didn't know its designation. It was just a mysterious, heavily armored American tank. Their intelligence reports were thin. Was it a limited prototype? They were on high alert, knowing that somewhere out there, the enemy's most feared tank, the Panther, was lurking. The date was April 21, 1945. The war in Europe was grinding to a halt, but the fighting was still incredibly fierce. As the American column advanced, they rounded a street corner, and there it was. Before the German crew could react, the American gunner, John Jack Irwin, had the Panther locked in his sights. He didn't hesitate. He fired a single 90mm armor-piercing round. The shell screamed across the short distance and slammed into the Panther's underbelly, a known weak spot. The impact was catastrophic. The round penetrated the thin armor plate, tearing through the tank's interior and igniting the ammunition stored inside. A massive explosion erupted from the Panther, blowing the turret clean off its chassis and sending it flying into the air before it crashed back down onto the street. This extra armor, combined with the powerful T-15E1 gun, turned the standard Pershing into a true heavy hitter, capable of going toe-to-toe with the heaviest German armor. After the dramatic duel in Dessau, the Super Pershing continued its service, but the war was rapidly coming to a close. Within a few weeks, Germany surrendered, and the conflict in Europe was over. The single Super Pershing that saw combat became a legend, a symbol of American ingenuity and the determination to create a weapon that could overcome any threat on the battlefield. Its story, however, doesn't end there. After the war, the data and experience gained from the T-26E4 project heavily influenced the future of American tank design. The lessons learned from the Super Pershing S-gun and armor configuration directly contributed to the development of the M46, M47, and the legendary M48 Patton series of tanks. These tanks would form the backbone of the U.S. Army and Marine Corps for decades to come, serving in conflicts like the Korean War and Vietnam. The M4A3E2 Sherman Jumbo, to the unsuspecting German Panzer crew. It looked just like any other Sherman they'd encountered countless times before, but this was a different beast altogether. Heavily armored, it was designed to lead the charge, to soak up punishment that would have turned a standard Sherman into a burning wreck. And on that fateful day in the winter of 1944, one particular Jumbo, nicknamed Cobra King, was about to carve its name into history. As the Battle of the Bulge raged, American forces were desperately trying to relieve the besieged 101st Airborne at Bastogne. Leading the spearhead of Patton's Third Army was a young lieutenant named Charles Bogus, commander of Cobra King. His mission was simple but incredibly dangerous: break through the German lines no matter the cost. The landscape was a winter nightmare: snow-covered fields, dense forests, and roads that were little more than icy death traps. Every tree could hide an anti-tank gun, every ridge a dug-in Panther. The Germans, confident in their superior armor and firepower, had set up a formidable defense. They knew the Americans were coming, but they expected the usual Shermans vulnerable prey for their formidable Panther tanks. The Panther was a masterpiece of German engineering, with its sloped armor and a long 75mm gun that could punch through Allied tanks from a great distance. They felt secure, almost arrogant, as they scanned the horizon for the telltale silhouette of the M4. As Cobra King and its company rumbled forward, they soon ran into a wall of German resistance. The air crackled with the zip of machine gun fire and the terrifying whoosh of anti-tank rockets. Other Shermans in the column were hit, their thin armor no match for German guns. But Cobra King just shrugged it off. Rounds that would have been fatal simply bounced off its thick hide. The German gunners must have been in disbelief. They were hitting their targets, but the lead Sherman just kept coming, like some unstoppable iron monster. Lieutenant Bogus, peering through his periscope, knew they were in a hornet's nest. He had to be bold. He had to be aggressive. He ordered his driver to push forward to close the distance. This was counterintuitive to standard tank doctrine, which preached using cover and distance. But Bogus understood his tank. The Jumbo's strength was its armor. Its weakness was its 75mm gun, which struggled to penetrate the Panther's frontal armor at long range. They had to get close. Suddenly, from the edge of a wood line, a shape emerged. It was low, wide, and menacing. A Panther. It was the apex predator of the battlefield, and it had Cobra King dead in its sights. This was the moment of truth, a duel between two titans. The German commander, likely one of the seasoned veterans of the Eastern Front, would have been confident. His gunner had a clear shot at what he thought was just another Sherman. The Panther fired first. A bright flash, a plume of smoke, and the 75mm armor-piercing round screamed towards the jumbo. The crew inside Cobra King braced for the inevitable impact. The shell struck the front glacis plate with a deafening clang, a sound like a giant hammer hitting a church bell. The whole tank shuddered from the force. Inside, the crew was rattled, but a quick check revealed the impossible. They were fine. The armor had held. The secret of the jumbo's extra plating had done its job. Now it was Bogus's turn. Gunner, traverse, left. Target, Panther, front. He yelled. His gunner, Private Hubert Irwin, was a cool hand. He swung the turret, the reticle of his sight settling on the German tank. But he knew a shot to the Panther's thick frontal armor would likely just bounce. They needed a weak spot. Driver, forward. Get me a better angle, Bogies commanded. The jumbo lurched forward, closing the gap under the Panther's very nose. It was an incredibly gutsy move. The Panther's crew, stunned that their first shot hadn't been a killing blow, was trying to reload. That small window of time was all Cobra King needed. As they got closer, Irwin spotted his chance. He wasn't aiming for the heavily sloped glacis. He was aiming for the weaker gun mantolith armored collar around the barrel of the gun. It was a smaller target, a much harder shot, but a potentially fatal one. On the way, Irwin shouted as he fired. Cobra King's 75mm shell flew true. It struck the Panther's mantlet. It didn't punch straight through, but the impact was so violent that it shattered the cast armor, sending a deadly spray of red-hot metal spall into the German tank's fighting compartment. Another theory suggests the round may have ricocheted down into the thinner hull roof. Whatever the exact mechanism, the effect was catastrophic. A flash of orange erupted from the Panther's hatches, followed by a thick column of black smoke. The beast was dead. The psychological impact on the other German defenders was immediate. Their best tank, their invincible Panther, had just been taken down in a head-to-head fight by a Sherman. A tank they thought they knew, a tank they held in contempt. Confusion and panic began to set in. Was this some new American superweapon? The sight of the burning Panther and the still advancing jumbo broke their will to fight. The German line wavered and then collapsed. Cobra King didn't stop. It smashed through the now disintegrating German position, becoming the first tank of the Third Army to break through and link up with the besieged paratroopers in Bastogne. The crew painted the words "First in Bastogne" on the side of their heroic tank. They had faced down the best the enemy had to offer and won. Not just through thicker armor, but through courage, audacity, and a refusal to back down. The story of Cobra King versus the Panther is more than just a tank duel. It's a testament to the idea that sometimes it's not just about having the best equipment, but about how you use it. It's about the human element, the bravery of a crew willing to charge into the jaws of death, and the skill of a gunner making a perfect shot under immense pressure. The jumbo was a secret weapon hidden in plain sight, a wolf in sheep's clothing that taught the Germans a brutal lesson they would never forget. Today, Cobra King, the very same tank, stands restored and preserved at the National Museum of the United States Army. It's a silent monument to that cold winter day and to the incredible bravery of its crew, who drove their secret tank straight into the pages of history. December 18, 1944. The Battle of the Bulge is raging. Near the Belgian village of Wergs, a fierce tank battle erupts. On one side, the battle-hardened veterans of the 2nd Panzer Division, confident in their superior Panther tanks. On the other, the American 740th Tank Battalion, equipped with a strange-looking new machine, the M36 Jackson. What happened next was a complete shock to the German tankers. They watched in disbelief as their supposedly invincible Panthers were knocked out one by one. The Americans weren't supposed to have anything that could stand up to a Panther, let alone destroy it with such ease. What was this mysterious tank? And why hadn't their intelligence warned them about it? This is the story of the M36 Jackson, the American tank destroyer that arrived just in time to turn the tide of the WWII. It's a tale of desperate innovation, battlefield surprises, and the clash of two of the most powerful armored fighting vehicles of World War II. The legend of the German Panther tank is well known. When it first appeared on the Eastern Front in 1943, it sent shockwaves through the Allied forces. Its thick, sloped armor was nearly impenetrable to existing anti-tank guns, and its long-barreled 75mm cannon could destroy Soviet T-34s and KV-1s south from distances where they could uneven fight back. The Panther was a masterpiece of German engineering, a perfect blend of firepower, protection, and mobility. It quickly earned a fearsome reputation as the best all-around tank of the war. When the Allies landed in Normandy in June 1944, they found themselves facing these same Panthers. The standard American tank, the M for Sherman, was tragically outmatched. Its 75mm gun was like a pea shooter against the Panther's frontal armor. Sherman crews had to resort to desperate tactics, trying to swarm the German behemoths and hit their weaker side or rear armor. Casualties were horrific. The hedgerow country of Normandy became a graveyard for American tanks, a phenomenon grimly known as Sherman baiting. The U.S. Army knew they had a problem long before Normandy. They saw the writing on the wall as early as 1942, with reports of new, heavier German tanks on the Eastern Front. The need for a more powerful anti-tank weapon was urgent. The existing tank destroyers, like the M10, were based on the Sherman chassis but armed with a 3-inch gun. It was an improvement, but still not enough to reliably defeat a Panther or a Tiger from the front. The solution came from the Ordnance Department in the form of a brand-new, high-velocity, 90mm anti-aircraft gun. This gun had incredible penetrating power. The challenge was mounting this massive weapon onto a mobile, turreted chassis. The initial attempts were clumsy. They tried putting it on an M10 hull, creating the T-71 gun motor carriage. It worked, but the turret was cramped, unbalanced, and open-topped, leaving the crew dangerously exposed to artillery and shrapnel. Development continued through 1943. The engineers worked tirelessly, designing a new, larger turret that could properly house the 90mm gun and its crew. They used the reliable M10A1 chassis, which was based on the M4A3 Sherman, giving it good mobility. The result was the T-71E1, which was standardized in June 1944 as the 90mm gun motor carriage. M36. We know it today as the Jackson, named after the Confederate General Stonewall Jackson, though the troops simply called it the 90. The M36 Jackson was a formidable machine. Its 90mm M3 gun could fire an armor-piercing round at over 2,600 feet per second, capable of punching through the Panther's frontal armor at standard combat ranges. This was the weapon the Americans had been dreaming of. However, the Jackson was still a tank destroyer, not a tank. It followed the American tank destroyer doctrine, which emphasized speed and firepower over armor. Its hull armor was relatively thin, and the initial models had an open-topped turret to save weight and improve situational awareness. This made the crew vulnerable, a trade-off for its powerful gun. Production was slow to start. The Army was focused on churning out Shermans. But the shocking losses in Normandy created a desperate, immediate demand. The call went out. We need 90mm guns, and we need them now. Factories scrambled to convert existing M10A1 hulls into M36s. Some even used older M4A3 Sherman hulls when M10s weren't available. By the fall of 1944, the first M36 Jacksons were finally arriving in Europe. Their timing couldn't have been better. On December 16, 1944, Hitler launched his last great offensive in the West, the Battle of the Bulge. Over 250,000. German soldiers and hundreds of tanks, including the elite Panther and King Tiger battalions, smashed through the thinly held American lines in the Ardennes forest. The initial shock was devastating. American units were overrun, surrounded, and forced into a desperate fighting retreat. The German plan was to punch through to the port of Antwerp, splitting the Allied armies and forcing a negotiated peace. Leading the German spearhead was the 2nd Panzer Division. Their confidence was sky high. They had faced American Shermans before and knew they held the advantage. But they weren't prepared for what they were about to encounter. As the 2nd Panzer Division advanced, they ran into elements of the U.S. 740th Tank Battalion. Attached to this battalion were the brand-new M36 Jacksons. The German tankers had never seen anything like them. The silhouette was similar to an M10, which they knew was no major threat. They likely assumed it was just another undergunned American tank destroyer. They were about to learn a brutal lesson. Near Wurgs, a Panther from the 2nd Panzer spotted what it thought was an easy kill an American tank destroyer. The Panther commander took aim, confident his frontal armor would deflect any incoming rounds. A flash erupted from the American vehicle. But instead of the familiar bounce of a 76mm round, there was a catastrophic impact. The 90mm shell from the M36 Jackson sliced through the Panther's thick glacis plate as if it were butter. The Panther shuddered to a halt, smoke pouring from the penetration hole. Inside, the crew was gone. The German tankers were stunned. Oh, what just happened? Before they could process the shock, another M36 opened fire, then another. The Jacksons, using classic tank destroyer tactics, had set up an ambush. They used their superior firepower from concealed positions, picking off the advancing panzers. In the ensuing engagement, several Panthers were destroyed without ever knowing what hit them. The myth of the Panther's invincibility was shattered in the snowy forests of Belgium. The M36's impact was immediate and profound. All along the Ardennes front, stories like this were repeated. The M36s were rushed to hotspots, acting as mobile fire brigades to blunt the German armored spearheads. They were the great equalizers. For the first time, American crews could engage Panthers and Tigers on something approaching equal terms. They no longer had to rely on desperate flanking maneuvers. They could meet the German Titans head-on and win. One of the most famous M36 aces was Sergeant Herschel Redkashin of the 703rd Tank Destroyer Battalion. During one engagement, he single-handedly destroyed 5 German tanks, including Panthers and Panzer IVs, earning him the Distinguished Service Cross. His actions, and those of countless other M36 crews, helped to stem the German tide and ultimately break the back of the Ardennes offensive. The M36 wasn't a perfect weapon. Its thin armor and open top remained significant vulnerabilities. But its 90mm gun was a game-changer. It gave American Gs the confidence to stand and fight against Germany's best tanks. The secret weapon had been revealed, and its effect on German morale was devastating. They could no longer advance with impunity, knowing that around any corner could be a lurking M36, ready to deliver a fatal 90mm punch. By the end of the war, the M36 Jackson had earned its place as one of the most effective tank destroyers of World War II. It arrived late to the party, but it arrived at the exact moment it was needed most. It was a testament to American industrial might and ingenuity, a weapon born of desperation that became a symbol of victory. It proved that sometimes the best way to defeat a monster is to build an even bigger monster slayer. The story of the M36 Jackson is a crucial chapter in the history of armored warfare. It highlights the constant cat-and-mouse game of battlefield technology, where one side's advantage is quickly met by a new innovation from the other. For the American tankers who faced the Panther's wrath, the M36 was more than just a new vehicle. It was their salvation. It was the gun that finally evened the odds. Thank you so much for watching. We've covered a lot of ground today, but there's always more to the story. What are your thoughts on the M36 Jackson? Do you think it was the best tank destroyer of the war? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into military history. We'll see you in the next one.